Hi, I'm Allison Watt, and today, as part of my Artists at Large series, I'm going to be interviewing Willow Friday. Willow is part of my everyday life because she owns the wonderful Iron Oxide Art Supplies store in downtown Nanaimo on Vancouver Island, where I live. And the store has changed my life as an artist and lots of other artists, local artists' lives. It's really an incredible spot to buy almost anything. And Willow is an amazing person to have in our community. She's also a wonderful artist. So I would like to take half an hour or so to talk to Willow about how she got to be where she is and a little bit about her work. So welcome, Willow.
Thank you so much, Allison, for having me. And I have to agree with you. It changed my life as well, having an art supply store. Much improved, and I would say for the better. It's just been an incredible experience meeting everybody who's artists who are artists in our community, and learning from them and growing. And yeah, no, it's been an incredible learning and growth experience. Uh,
Well, we're going to take a look at your store. I'm going to share my screen, and then I will look at your art, and you'll get a chance to talk a little bit more about how you got to be where you
yeah.
are, and then we'll have a chat, another little chat afterwards. So here we go. I'm going to share my screen. All right, there it is, the heart of our community.
Yeah. So Iron Oxide is an independent art supply store. I started it from scratch with the desire to have art supplies myself. And it's evolved a couple of times. I used to have a store called House of Indigo, which was a consignment boutique, which you remember you used to find wonderful clothing
Oh,
items
yeah, I
in there.
still have some of my favorite things that I picked up at that shop.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and so I started, well, actually, I didn't start. A woman came into my store who I knew mutually through another friend, and she wanted to start an art supply store, and I had had a similar idea. So we figured out a way to make it work so that she had space within my store, and she started a little tiny, it was in a 10-foot by 10-foot square foot space in House of Indigo called Blue Sky Art Supplies. And then her husband got transferred for work, and she also went with him. And at that point, I took over what was left and brought all the art supplies under houseofindigo.com, which then evolved and grew and grew and grew until it was busting at the seams in that tiny little space. And I needed a bigger store, and I had realized I'd found my passion. And that's when I started looking for a new, bigger location, and remembered that there was space underneath the firehouse grill from there being a coffee shop there years ago, but it had sat, I'm not going to say empty, I'm going to say full of crap for 15 years. And it took 6 months of pretty intense renovations to clean it up and to make it all tickety-boo and get everything organized. And proper things for the city, handicap bathrooms, whatnot. And yeah, so 6 months later, in January of 2014, Iron Oxide Art Supplies was born, and I think I created a monster.
Well, I remember when you were fixing that space up, and it was backbreaking work that you did largely yourself, right?
Yeah,
Like if I
yeah,
remember, you stripped all of the ceiling panels away so that all of the piping was visible, kind of an industrial chic kind of look,
for
right?
the out.
Yeah, and then this is what I remember talking to you about that just blew me away, that you made all the flooring by cutting plywood, sanding it and staining it, and then gluing it onto the floor piece by piece. And
Yeah,
it really is, it's a really great space. And then of course the brick is still part of the historic building because it was the fire hall in
mhm,
Nanaimo at one time. So
yeah,
it's got a really nice warm kind of feel to it as soon as
Yeah.
you walk in.
I
So
can't tell that the building really makes it. And Nanaimo doesn't have many brick treasures like this. And I feel very, very fortunate to have been able to land in it.
yeah.
And honest,
So you said that you realized that you found your passion.
yeah. I'd I'd always wanted to get into selling art supplies. And even when my store in its beginning was up on Fitzwilliam Street, I had contacted Colart, which is the main supplier for Windsor Newton, because that was the brand I knew, and had asked them, to send me catalogs and get in. I wanted to get into art supplies. This was like 20 years ago. And it took a while because, the investment of it all and timing and the amount of space that I had to do things in. And I can't express enough how instrumental it was meeting Natalie Sexton, who started Blue Sky Art Supply, to actually make it happen. But it had always been a passion. I'd always known that I wanted something that was, more like the opuses and more like the larger city centers have. Not a big corporate store. Like I didn't want that sort of feel. I wanted it to be very personal and, artist run by artists for artists. So
Yeah, well, I've always felt from the very start that when I walked in there, if I had a product that I really wanted to find, you would try your utmost to help me find it. And that was really amazing. And you're in my actual community because even though I live on a little island, it's in the harbor of Nanaimo, and the harbor of Nanaimo is the downtown core. And like a lot of towns, Nanaimo's old downtown core has kind of disappeared out into the suburbs. So one of the things I love about your store too is that it is actually a downtown store, part of
mhm.
the old core of the original city. So that's really wonderful. So you were a really good photographer, and you are a really, really fantastic photographer.
Definitely one of
So
my.
when did you start painting? You were painting before you got the art store, right?
Oh, since I was a kid, I've always been into drawing and painting. And, my parents would always encourage that. So as a young child, they'd buy me oil paints and I, obviously was not great at the time, but you know what, actually looking at some of the pieces that I did back when I was like 11, 12 years old, they have a certain sweetness about them that I actually wouldn't mind hanging. My mom's got a piece and I wouldn't mind hanging it on my wall.
I just had all of my, well, not all, a lot of my favorite drawings and paintings of my daughters when she was like 6 to 8.
Yeah.
Um, Scanned and cleaned up by a graphic artist and printed in archivally and framed. And they're just so
Oh,
sweet. And they're not in my house, they're in her house now. But yeah, I think that, and that's what I'm always striving to remind people in my classes is that, if we can get back in touch with that kind of just joyful engagement of making art that we had before we were really worried about what the outcomes were going to be, we can sort of tap into some of our intuitive knowledge that, shines out of children's work, right?
yeah.
But anyway, are you still doing a lot of photography?
I haven't been since COVID happened. So that actually, honestly, don't think I've picked up my camera since 2020.
Mm.
Um, I really enjoy traveling and kind of just taking the time, the dedicated time to doing photography that way. Um, though I have been looking at it since we moved at my camera situation. It's in a different spot, and I've been looking at it, and it's been calling my name.
But meanwhile, you're also painting. What are your before we talk about your painting, I want to keep focused on the store a bit more. So, what is it that you love about running the art store?
I think it's, and this is going to sound cheesy, but I honestly think it's my clientele. everyone has a different sort of puzzle that needs to be solved. And whether that's finding a product that they can't get and they would like to have access to, or if it's figuring out a solution for something technically that's going on. I'm always saying that it's like my video game. And I feel like when I can figure something out for someone and help them, I get powered up.
And so do we.
And
Mutually.
I learned so much from it. Like, I didn't know what a lot of products, you've introduced me to so many products, types of pens and watercolors. And I think that the store has grown not just by my desire and wants and needs, but because of the ability for people to have a conversation and let me know what works and what doesn't work and why. And yeah, it's definitely, it grows through the community.
Yeah, and the store is just the right size so that when you come in as a customer, you don't feel like you have to, walk across, you know, a long way across a big store to try to find somebody to help you. There's always a staff member handy, and I've discovered lots of new materials there too. It's a bit of a problem actually. Because there's just so much treasure there, and yeah.
I do joke with people that it's not the store that's a monster. I'm a bit of a monster, and sorry, not sorry.
Right. Yeah, well, you can't resist, right? But it's
So
wonderful for us.
art supplies are kind of like shooting fish in a barrel, but like, can you imagine? So like, say you come in and you see one thing and it inspires you and you just have to have it. Well, I'm doing the same thing, but on this major scale with all these things. Sometimes it's a little overwhelming because there's so much. Like, honestly, this art supplies that are in my store, it's probably only like 10% of what's available out
Yeah.
on the market.
Have you found, did the business do well with COVID? Because, we always hear that all of the, do DIY and creative work, everyone was home focusing on that. So what was your experience with that?
It did. In the very beginning, there was a dip down, which was scary because people just weren't going out. So I was doing my best to help people, to get supplies to people, wherever they were, whatever their fears were with going out into the world. But then it became like therapy, I think, for a lot of people. I saw a lot of nurses coming into my
Oh,
store.
really?
Felt really
Hmm.
good. Yeah, it was like their way of coping. And
Yeah.
I still am seeing nurses, and it just makes me, touches my heart that I'm able to give them something that will allow them to have some sort of, peace in this whole process while they help people on that real level of saving
Yeah.
lives. Um, and yeah, so it didn't come without its trials and tribulations. Getting a bit busier, it is harder to get supplies. I think the whole industry has seen issues. Funnily enough, not just from COVID, but from like shortages of actual particles of materials like pigments and polymers for acrylic paint.
Hmm.
Um, the world has actually been on rations of polymer, so that,
Really? I
yeah, but
didn't
that's not
know
COVID.
that.
Well, it's partly COVID related, but it's more related to the storms that happened in Texas a couple of years ago. They
Oh,
actually destroyed a couple of factories that produce plastic particles for North America, but for like all industries. So like anything in healthcare, cars, paint, acrylic paint. And so they were able to get back up and running, but demand had shot up. So they
mhm.
weren't, it was like, because they were behind, it was a slippery slope. We're just coming out of it. So you're starting to see like golden acrylic paints is now making larger sizes again. They weren't able to make their 16, 32 ounce and gallon sizes of paints and mediums for quite some time.
Hmm.
Uh,
You're reminding me I have to stop in and top up some of my supplies, so I'm going to come in tomorrow and see what you've got.
way of reminding people about these.
So I'm going to go on to the next slide,
Sure.
and you can tell us about this image.
So this was a mural that I painted. Humanity in Art got their hands on this building downtown Nanaimo, and they were given permission to create a public art gallery. And I was one of the artists chosen to create this piece, which is two sets of wings that I had intended for two people to stand next to and give each other a hug. I called it Embrace Nanaimo, and to create that that connection. I find it kind of ironic that it was actually graffitied all over just before COVID happened, when embracing became this really taboo thing. And I thought, I wouldn't have chosen this at this time to paint something that gets people hugging. But yeah, so it was actually mostly hand painted. I did start out with spray paint, and then I hand painted it with a 1-inch brush, mostly in oil paint.
Really, it's such a beautiful piece.
It really, I'm pleased with it, how it turned out. The scale was incredible to work with. You know, you keep having to get away from it in order to see where you're at and see if perspective is working on it. And then for the goal of having people in front of it taking photos and height levels and whatnot. So it was kind of cute. I would notice some people who would go up and stand right against the wall, and it would look like it was kind of hovering above them, because the intention was to come forward from it. So that it could
and kind of fun fact, that's your daughter standing.
That's my beautiful daughter, Ocean. Yes. Yeah, I love her.
And she became a flight attendant.
Yes. Yes.
So the wings are even more appropriate.
Yes, totally, totally. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great piece. Love it.
This is the Grand Canyon, which is, so I work off of my photos for my own artwork a lot. I like to have, you know, because I think I take some really fun, interesting photos. I like to get into places when weather is doing some pretty cool things and lighting and what have you. And so I'm trying to emulate that a little bit in this piece with the light, the morning light hitting the Grand Canyon. Woke up really early to go and get that photo.
It's a gorgeous painting. I'm so happy to have a chance to see these pieces of your work.
Yeah, it's a 24 by 36, this one, also done in oils. And yeah, it's I like the plum color to it, and I think I've been bringing more purples and reds into my pieces more recently. I'm not sure why that is. But yeah, I really love the shadowing and the purples and plums of it. That when I see them in other people's pieces, it appeals to me. Plum color.
And especially with the yellow palette there too, so you get that great complementary excitement. Yeah, it's great. Beautiful.
This is another oil piece painted. This is Myra Falls out in Strathcona Park. Beautiful area to go explore. Actually, not a very hard hike to get to, just a long drive, because you have to go all the way down to the end of Buttle Lake and then back on the other side. I got there in the evening for this one. It looks like morning light, but it's actually in the evening. So the sun is setting in the west and just coming through the gully there. And then, I don't know, the deer is completely out of my imagination. It needed something to be enjoying the sun.
I just noticed it, actually. Is there anybody that you admire as a landscape painter or a school of landscape painting? Your palette is really colorful, and I just wondered if there's anybody in particular that inspires you.
Yes, there are. I don't know if it necessarily is in this work, but our local painter Dominik Modlinski.
Oh yeah.
And you.
Thank you.
I'm very inspired I've actually taken a class with Dominik Modlinski because I really enjoy his pieces, and he's an excellent teacher as well.
Yes.
And I love your work as well. When I look at my pieces, I'm seeing something that's missing, And that's like a lot of more neutral tones. I'm very bold with my color play, and I do love it. I passionately love color. And I try and throw color at everything. My husband says that he's like this grid and I'm like the splash of color that's been thrown at it.
Yeah. Well, it's, I mean, that's your vision coming through, and it shows in your photography too. I mean, you're very attracted to the sort of interesting light and what it does to the color in landscape. I've noticed.
Yeah.
So, but do you feel that there's neutrals missing? Did you say, or are you happy with that?
Like I don't see gray tones in there at all. And I think that so there's a painter, Scott Naismith, he's a Scottish painter.
Mhm.
And he really understands color and the balance of color really, really well. And if you look at his pieces, you can see a lot of gray tonal values.
Yeah.
And it makes the color that is there
Yes.
often have more impact. And
Yeah.
so I think we're going to focus on that with pieces going forward, is how to bring in those neutrals to create more.
Yeah, it's I find it useful to mix the colors that I'm working with, the pure hues that I'm working with, to create the neutrals in my
Yeah.
palette.
So
Yeah.
that
And
they are.
it's harmonious.
This is something that I explain to a lot of customers. Color is like sound in that it's wavelengths hitting our receptors, our sensors, and we perceive them either through our eyes or our ears, but it's the same thing. It's just wavelengths going through the air until we perceive them. And just like you can have discord in a group of notes on a piano or in music, you can have the same thing with color, but we don't really understand it in the same way. So sometimes we'll see colors that aren't working together, and it's the same as like a chord that has a note that is unharmonious with the other ones, or it isn't in the right key. And color works the same way. And when you mix your neutrals, you get that harmonious color that's singing together properly.
Yeah, exactly. And it is a complex. I mean, I'm still mastering it myself. I think it's sort of takes a while to figure out, because we get we get very distracted by color, and so it's hard for us, I think, to really um, hear it properly. Like
Totally.
it's easier for us to hear a discord in music than I think it is to figure out what's going on with color, that we need to just tinker with, tweak it a little bit, right?
I think it really stems from an understanding of what color actually is. Like it's really easy to you play the piano, you press some notes, and you can see what's going on. Like it's very easy to understand. You just hit that note, it's tuned at this amount, and you can get it. But light is color, not the thing, not the painting. All the color is in the light spectrum.
Right.
And well, just like if you're not actually pressing a piano key, you don't hear any noise. It's in the light and not in the piece that we're looking at. And therefore different light sources have different types of colors. That's why things look different under incandescent or direct sunlight, or behind screens, the RGB color. It's completely different color spectrum.
Right, and we can see so many more different wavelengths of light than we can hear music. I think we can see a million different colors.
Yeah.
We're so sensitive to color. Anyway, well, yeah, we could talk all afternoon about color. One of the things I did in a course I taught recently was I had the students mix color,
Yeah.
and then paint pieces of paper with it, and then cut it out and make collages so that they could see so there's a lot of neutrals, and see how the neutrals worked with the pure tones. They used 3 primaries of their own choosing, and black and white. And then it was almost like taking the brush out of a student's hand. It helps them be a little bit more, like slows you down and be more deliberate about putting the colors together. And when you're using pieces of collage, you can move them around and see how they're interacting. Anyway, that's on my YouTube channel. It's called The Key to Color. And I loved doing it myself. Like some of the stuff I just dream up like the day before I teach it. I learned a lot from it myself. And I just, I'm really enthusiastic about that one as a one way to think about color. Anyway,
Mhm.
yeah.
And how much like what colors look like next to each other depending on how much space they're taking up too, the volume of it as well. Like it changes. Something will look purple in one sitting and blue in the next.
Yeah,
It's
depending on what it's pushed up against. Absolutely. Yeah, fantastic. So, is this oil? This doesn't look like oil.
No, you're right. Good instinct. It's watercolor. It's actually almost entirely the pearlescent watercolors, and this is
Oh,
on
right,
black watercolor paper,
right.
which
Wow,
is a
cool.
really fun thing to do in any medium because you can paint in oil, acrylic, or watercolor. You can paint on black.
Right.
Watercolor is a little different because it tends to be transparent, but
Mhm.
the pearlescent paints, and I'm actually think I'm going to bring this one down to the store to show people because I think the pearlescents, I love, love, love them, but they can be gimmicky if they're not done used right.
Mhm.
But I think that this piece is, I don't know, I'm again, it's the shadows, it's those purples and blues, and they give me
Mhm.
a feeling that I really enjoy.
Yeah, and I suppose if you turn it, it flashes, right? Like you get a different kind of sense of the color as it turns in the light.
Which you would think would not work, but it does somehow, and
Yeah,
still
those are-
natural. Like I don't like things to look um too fake, I guess,
yeah.
even though I color so much and throw in opera pink and all these crazy fluorescent colors quite often. I still am a very earthy person, so I like things to feel organic still.
Yeah, I'd love to see this in real life.
Yeah, I'll bring it down. Yeah, I think it would be really smart to do.
Yeah. So, and then they're fairly opaque in places too, huh? They're like I'm looking down at the greens here for watercolor. It's fairly opaque. Did
Yeah,
you add white to
I
it, or is that just what it comes out of the
think them. I think that they just have an opacity that you don't get because of the mica flakes
right, right.
that
Super
cover.
fun. Super fun. You must get so distracted by all the fantastic different media.
Yeah, I do. It's hard. It's not an easy life. There are so many little details and little things that I'm like, oh this, oh that, oh this, oh that. And
Yeah.
another passion is gardening, and another passion is all the things. I've actually had to consciously choose to focus on just a few things in my life. Like I used to do fire dancing, and I had to make a conscious choice to focus on my business first, which Iron Oxide. And so it was around that time that I actually stopped fire dancing because there's only so many hours in a day.
I'm not sure I know what fire dancing is.
Spinning fire poi and fire hula hoop and fire
Wow.
eating. It's a past life. It's pre 2014.
Well, maybe you'll get to it in the old folks' home, Willow.
I love it.
Okay.
Okay, so this is, I was going to chat about a few of my favorite art supplies, and this palette here, the U.GO plein air palette, is definitely one of my favorites. It's designed by a couple of brothers, New Wave palettes. They're out of the United States, and their attention to detail it's immaculate, and it's a very lightweight, very easy to use palette. And when I go on hikes, like I'm hiking for miles and miles and miles, I really don't want to regret carrying any extra weight. And
Mhm.
I've taken this out into places and never, ever, ever regretted it. Only been happy. It fits onto my photography tripod, so I can like dual that thing. I've actually got a quick release on the bottom of this guy and a quick release on the bottom of my camera, so I can easily interchange them. If there's like, if a deer walked through, I could be like, oh, camera time, and switch it out really quickly.
I'll
Um,
put notes in the notes under our video. I'll make
yeah,
some notes on some of the things that come up that we're talking about, like this one. It's called the U.GO palette.
U.GO, U.GO. Yeah,
And also the other artists that you've mentioned as well.
yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
that's great.
and the paper that I'm using is actually one of the other things, and that's the Arche oil paper. Do you paint oils? Do you?
Not very much. I have a few in my studio. I have oils in my studio.
I really enjoy it when I'm going traveling because I can set my palette up like the night before because I usually get up really early.
Mhm.
So to go on these hikes. So I set out my palette and just close it up and have everything ready to go. And it's fantastic. So I paint oil I don't know, maybe as much as I do acrylic, but when I'm traveling, I don't paint acrylic at all. It's
Yeah, it's
all
very frustrating to paint plein air with acrylic.
yeah, it dries. There's things you can do to make them be better, but yeah, no, it's the oil is there's something about it. There's just the flow of it, the stickiness of it. It's yeah, I really enjoy it. So yeah, the Arch water oil paper is ready to go. It's lightweight.
Uh-huh.
It's just wonderful. It's smooth, and I really enjoy it. It also absorbs the oils a little bit, so
Mhm.
your pieces dry fairly quickly. And generally, like I'll have a pad with me. Generally, by the time I've kind of finished the little sketch that I've done, I can close the book and stick everything carefully back in. And as long as it's not rubbing around too much, it makes it back to the car no problem. Like 9 out of 10, I've had maybe a few pieces that I've lost by it slipping too much, or maybe there was a spot that was wetter. But yeah, and that's not really the end of the world because they're just sketches.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Oh, is that in Arches Park?
Oh, this is in Capitol Reef. I believe I want to say Hickman, Hickman, I think it is, Arch in Capitol Reef. Capitol Reef is like a little known park that's kind of like Arches, kind of like Zion, but way
Mm.
quieter. So
And is it in Utah?
it is, yeah. It's in that Utah, Arizona sort of area. I believe it's technically in Utah, but it's right on the border near
I
Goblin Valley.
love that area. I've traveled there a lot and haven't been there for a while.
I know, I miss it.
Oh, it's such a beautiful landscape. I think that is our last image, so I'm going to just go back to to us. Thank you. That was fascinating. So just a few more questions that maybe we have talked quite a lot about some of the things I wanted to ask you. Um, was there any like person or event that was kind of changed your path as far as you ending up where you are now? I think you mentioned the woman who opened up the art section in Indigo, right?
Natalie Sexton,
Yeah.
and we became great friends. And honestly, that partnership was one of the best things that have ever happened. I was able to watch her section of the store, and she was able to watch mine. And for that, I was actually for the first time able to get a few days off and go explore places with my daughter.
Yeah.
And it was real, yeah, good years. to,
It's interesting how it's really the people that change the paths of our life, right? Like we have our own passions and our studies and things, but it's the people that we meet along the way. And that's the thing about that, which is wonderful and scary too, is that you never know who they're going to be, or you can't really plan meeting them because they're just those things that happen. Life kind of delivers them to you. So
yeah.
where is she now? Did she stay in town?
She is on the East Coast. No, she moved to Calgary and then she moved to the East Coast of Canada. So she's, I believe, in New Brunswick or no, it's oh, I don't know the geography very well over there because I've never been. And that's a place I'd really like to travel to. Oh
Yeah.
my goodness, the East Coast.
Is she a working artist?
Yes, she is. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
great. I'll look her up online. Okay, finally, is there anything that you still really want to do, either with your business or in your painting practice, that's like kind of an ambition that you are just holding there in the future?
So very recently, my husband and I just bought our first house, and
Mhm.
it's on zero point 0.6 of an acre. So we're in the process of turning this into food, flowers. And on this property, there's one of those old school car garages, and that's going to be my studio. So I want to incorporate florals. I want to paint florals. I want to grow flowers. I want the next couple of years want to be dedicated to flowers, turning them into all sorts of things, whether they be wreaths or images that are painted or just bouquets that I share with people. Yeah, so I'm definitely the smells and yeah, I've got a whole bunch of stuff started right now, straw flowers and
Great.
all.
Well, if I know you, Willow, I'm sure you'll make that happen. And I
Yeah,
can't wait to see where you take it.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, excited.
So thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Oh,
And
it's my pleasure and my honor. Like, you're a hero. This is, I feel like I really should be interviewing you. You're this real special one.
I really like, because often when I see you, I'm rushing in, buying something, you've got another person to talk to. So it's really nice to just like have this little more intimate chat together. I've loved it. So, and I'll see you tomorrow because I'm going to drop by tomorrow.
I'll be there. Okay. Thank you so much.